All right, guys, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're decoding an absolutely crucial topic for your ACCA exams: public versus private companies. If you're gearing up for business and technology, or, even touching on corporate and business law, you know exactly why we're here. This topic is literally a cornerstone of the syllabus, and the examiner, well, they absolutely love to test your understanding of these specific corporate structures. So are you ready to crush this? Because this is a highly tested area, and we need to make sure you dodge every single trap the examiner sets for you. We're not just going to sit here and read facts today. No way. We are going to build a mental framework so incredibly solid that when you see a multiple choice question on this, you'll instantly know the answer before you've even finished reading the options. Let's dive right in. Section 1. Introducing public and private. Okay, so the baseline dividing line here is beautifully simple. A public company, that just means its shares are traded publicly on a market. Basically, anyone can buy in. A private company, on the flip side, means its shares are kept totally locked down and are not publicly traded. That is the fundamental difference. It's all about the shares and exactly who can get their hands on them. The absolute second a company's shares are opened up to the general public to buy and sell on an exchange, boom, it crosses that threshold into being a public company. Now, before we move on, listen up, because I want to give you a really quick cross-syllabus golden nugget here. If you're also looking at your corporate and business law notes, the LW exam, you absolutely must remember that a public limited company, a PLC, requires a minimum share capital of £50,000. That's a hard, non-negotiable legal requirement to operate as a public company. So just lock that number in your mind right now, £50,000 for a PLC. Section 2. The big three differences. All right, so this right here is your holy grail for this topic. You absolutely must be able to perfectly contrast these three core features: share trading, the level of regulation, and the scope of ownership. So for a public company, share trading is public, regulation is high, and ownership is wide. For a private company, share trading is restricted, regulation is lower, and ownership is limited. Literally every single scenario question you face on this topic is going to map straight back to one of these three core concepts. Let's unpack the public side first, okay? For public companies, remember that because ownership is really wide, meaning there's a massive number of everyday shareholders, and those shares are actively traded publicly, the examiner expects you to know that regulation is incredibly high. And the crucial point here is the why. Why is regulation so high? Well, it's because the government and financial authorities, they need to protect all those everyday investors. High regulation is basically the necessary trade-off for getting access to all that public money. Now, conversely, let's look at the private company profile. Private companies have restricted ownership, and their shares are simply not publicly traded. And because you don't have thousands of everyday people buying in, the regulation is noticeably lower, which honestly perfectly explains why founders or owners often choose to stay private. Think of massive companies like ACCA or Mars. They deliberately stay private specifically to avoid that outside interference. By dealing with restricted ownership and lower regulation, the original owners get to retain so much more control over the direction of the business. Less outside money essentially equals less outside interference. Section 3. Dodging the exam traps. We are now entering the danger zone, guys. The examiner is definitely going to try to trick you here, so let's do a rapid-fire quiz. Question 1. If the exam scenario tells you that a company's shares are listed on a stock exchange, you need to instantly know the answer. Don't overthink the wording. Just look at that key phrase, listed on a stock exchange. What kind of company is it? Boom, it's a public company. It really is that simple. The word listing literally equals public. If a share is listed, it just means it's sitting out there on a public market for anyone at all to buy. The examiner will absolutely use the word listed as a direct synonym for traded publicly. So do not let the vocabulary throw you off. Okay, next scenario. Let's see if you can catch this one. What if the text in the exam suddenly tells you share transfers are restricted? Again, zero in on the key word there, restricted. Where does that belong in our big three framework? Exactly. It's a private company, because those shares are not freely moving around the market. If you literally have to go ask permission from the board of directors to sell your shares to someone else, well, that is a restriction. And restrictions mean the company is private. You guys are doing great. Let's keep this momentum going. So what are the actual pitfalls here? Well, according to your syllabus notes, the two most common mistakes students make are, number 1, completely confusing the concept of listing with just simple ownership, and number 2, totally ignoring the massive difference in regulatory burdens between the two. Listen, just because a company is huge and has a ton of owners doesn't automatically make it public. It is only public if it's listed. And remember, public companies carry a massive regulatory burden that private companies simply do not have. So please, whatever you do, do not ignore that regulation difference when you're reading an exam scenario. Let's actually ground this with a really specific example from the text. If you see an example in your exam paper, like a company listed on the National Stock Exchange or the NSE, that listing is your absolute dead giveaway. Listed on the NSE equals a public company. They might try to throw you off and give you a giant, rambling paragraph of backstory about the company's founders, but I promise you, if that one single sentence says, listed on the NSE, everything else is just noise. It's public. Section 4. The ultimate memory trigger. All right, let's cross the finish line with the absolute most important takeaway you need before you walk into that exam hall. Burn this one-line summary into your brain right now. Seriously, say it out loud with me if you have to. Public equals listed, private equals restricted. That right there is your ultimate cheat code for this entire section of the syllabus. Public equals listed, private equals restricted. If you filter every single exam question you get through that specific lens, you will literally never get a public versus private company question wrong again. Now that you have these core differences and exam traps completely locked down, how are you going to apply this to your next practice paper? The next time you look at your absolute favorite brand today, I want you to ask yourself, are they listed or are they restricted? And how does that corporate structure actually shape the products you buy from them? Take this framework, apply it to your revision, and start looking at the corporate world with a completely fresh perspective. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep that focused energy up.